In the spring of 1928, a farmer plowing a field on the Syrian coast felt his blade catch and stop against something that was not a rock. He levered it up. Under the slab there was a passage, and under the passage, cut stone steps going down into the dark. The tomb at the bottom had been robbed in antiquity. What the robbers left behind was the strange part: Cypriot pottery, some of it showing Mycenaean influence. A burial on a Syrian beach, furnished with imports from across the sea. The first men to inspect it wondered whether the place had been a Cypriot outpost. Proper excavation began the following spring. Claude Schaeffer dug the shore site first, then turned his attention to the mound standing behind it. On the 14th of May, 1929, a workman named Mohammed Morsal turned up the first clay tablets in a wedge script nobody alive could read. It was cuneiform, but with far too few signs for cuneiform. Only about 30 of them. 30 signs is not a syllabary. 30 signs is an alphabet. Somebody in the late Bronze Age had written an alphabet in wedges. Within a year, 3 scholars working more or less separately had cracked it. The language underneath turned out to be a close cousin of Hebrew. The mound was Ras Shamra. The city buried inside it was Ugarit. On its acropolis, between 2 temples, there was a library, which matters because one whole religious world had until then left no surviving voice of its own. Baal, Asherah, the gods the Hebrew prophets attacked for centuries. Almost everything anyone knew about them came from the people attacking them. Then their own poets started talking. So here is my promise. By the end of this you will be able to keep 3 kinds of evidence apart. Because the worst mistake made about these gods is not a wrong date or a wrong name. It is a blend. There are 3 bodies of evidence here, and they do not belong to each other. The trick is hearing which one a claim is coming from. Layer 1 is Ugarit itself, clay tablets written down around 1400 years before Christ in one city by one scribal school. Layer 2 is the Hebrew Bible, later further south written by the opposition for the express purpose of telling Israel not to do that. Layer 3 is a Greek book, the Phoenician history of Philo of Byblos, written under the Roman Empire, well over 1,000 years after Ugarit burned. And Philo's book does not survive. It survives in quotations, inside a Christian bishop's argument against paganism. That is, 2 removes from anything. Blend those 3 together, and you can manufacture almost any claim you like about the Canaanites, and never once see the joins. There is a 4th trap, and it is subtler. Ugarit gets called Canaanite constantly. Ugarit did not think it was Canaanite. One of its own administrative lists labels a man Jael the Canaanite, the way you label a foreigner in your own paperwork. A letter from the same archive, written in Akkadian, separates the men of Ugarit from the men of Canaan as 2 different groups of people. The scholar Peter Craigie had the cleanest way of putting it. Calling these poems Canaanite is like calling Robert Burns an English poet. Broadly, you know what is meant. Precisely, it is wrong. Ugarit when it is Ugarit then. The Bible when it is the Bible. Here is why that matters. Across the tablets, Baal carries one standing title, Rider of the Clouds. It attaches to him the way gray-eyed attaches to Athena. Now open Psalm 68, and you find a line about the God of Israel that the English translations flatly cannot agree on. Some render it, Him who rides through the deserts. Others render it, Him who rides on the clouds. It is the same Hebrew word. That word can mean step. It also sits one letter away from the word for cloud, and the Ugaritic title is exactly why translators reach for cloud. Elsewhere, there is no ambiguity at all. Isaiah has the Lord riding on a swift cloud. A psalm makes the clouds his chariot. Second collision. On one tablet, the goddess Anat lists off the monsters she has personally destroyed. The twisty serpent, the potentate with 7 heads. Elsewhere, the god of death names the same creature and gives it a proper name. Latan, the fleeing serpent, the twisty serpent, the potentate with 7 heads. That is the tablet's phrasing, not mine. Now Isaiah chapter 27, Leviathan the fleeing serpent, Leviathan the twisting serpent, and the dragon that is in the sea. 2 adjectives. The same 2, in the same order, for the same creature, in 2 languages with something like half a millennium between them. And a psalm remembers God crushing the heads of Leviathan. Plural. Nothing in the Hebrew text ever explains why a sea dragon has more than one. Third collision. Baal's mountain is Sapan, a real peak visible from the city, and the same 3 consonants become the ordinary Hebrew word for north. Isaiah mocks a fallen king who said in his heart, "I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north." Look at the footnote in your own Bible. In the remote parts of Zaphon, the mountain of the divine assembly, named on the page. And a psalm calls Mount Zion beautiful in elevation, the joy of all the earth, in the far north. Jerusalem is not in the north. Here is the load-bearing point of this whole video, and I would rather put it early than bury it at the end. The biblical writers are not ignorant of this material. They are fluent in it. They know the epithets, the monsters, the sacred geography, the divine counsel. What they do is take that entire inherited vocabulary and hand every single piece of it to one God, deliberately and in public. The rider of the clouds is not Baal. The serpent with the many heads is already dead. The mountain of assembly belongs to somebody else. That is not borrowing. That is argument, and you can only hear it as argument once you can hear what it is arguing with. So let us read it. 6 tablets, badly damaged. Around 1,800 surviving lines. We call them the Baal cycle, though whether they are one poem or several is still argued over. The last tablet carries a colophon, a signature. The scribe is Elimoku, student of Atenu the diviner, writing for a named king of Ugarit, Nikmadu. That is a level of provenance most ancient mythology never gets. Hold on to it the next time somebody tells you what the Canaanites believed. The story. The high god El presides over a divine family, and El decides that the sea is going to be king. The sea has a name. Yam. His parallel title in every line is Judge River. He is water with a court and a throne and lawyers. Yam sends messengers into the assembly with a demand. Hand over Baal. The gods drop their heads onto their knees. And El agrees. Your slave is Baal, O Yam. The father of the pantheon sides with the sea against the storm. This is the first thing no summary prepares you for. Baal is not the supreme god here. He is the challenger, and he will not win alone. The craftsman god is fetched. Kothar Wahasis, skilled and wise, who lives, the poem says, both in Crete and in Memphis. He forges 2 weapons, and the forging is a spell. Each weapon is named aloud, and the name is not decoration. It is an instruction. The first is Yagarish. Driver, drive Yam from his throne. Leap from Baal's hand like a raptor from his fingers. It strikes Yam in the torso. Yam does not fall. The tablet is careful about that. Strong is Yam, it says. He does not sink. So Kothar forges a second one, Ayamari, expeller, and this one is aimed higher, at the head, between the eyes. It strikes. Yam collapses to the earth, his joints shake, his frame gives way, and Baal finishes him. Then the goddess Astarte rebukes him for it, because the defeated Yam was a captive. Even the victory arrives with somebody objecting. Nothing here is clean. Now compare a psalm. You divided the sea by your might. You broke the heads of the sea monsters on the waters. In Isaiah and the Psalms, the same fight keeps surfacing. Israel's writers inherited that story shape and then insisted, loudly, on the name of the winner. Baal wins and immediately has a problem. He has no house. In this poem, a god without a palace is a god without kingship. Every other god has one. Baal, the tablet says, has no house like the gods, no court like the holy ones, and permission belongs to El, who is not inclined to hand it over. So the campaign runs through the women of the family. First Anat, who goes to her father and threatens him. Then Athirot, the mother of the pantheon, whose titles are Lady Athirot of the Sea and Creatress of the Gods. When we first meet her, she is doing chores, a spindle in her hand, her robes down in the water, a pot set on the coals. She goes to El. El gives way to her. Baal gets his palace because the mother of the gods asked for it on his behalf. Kothar builds it from Lebanon cedar, from silver and from gold, and sets a fire burning inside the house for 6 days together. On the 7th, the fire goes out and the metal has fused. Silver turned to plating, gold turned to brick, and then the poem starts arguing about a window. Kothar asks to install one. Baal refuses. Twice. He gives reasons involving his daughters and involving Yam coming back up out of the water. Kothar's reply is a single line, and it is almost smug. You will return, O Baal, to my word. Baal holds out. He tours his territory, taking town after town, sits enthroned in his finished house, and then changes his mind and asks for the window. Kothar laughs at him, the tablet says, because the window was never architecture in the first place. Watch what happens the instant it opens. Baal opens a break in the clouds. Baal gives vent to his holy voice. The window in the palace is the gap in the sky. The high places of the earth shake. His enemies take to the woods. He looks east, with a cedar held in his right hand. The whole architectural argument was about whether the storm god is willing to let the rain out. That is, this poem's idea of a plot. Which brings us to El, who has been sitting quietly at the back of every scene so far. He does not fight. He does not ride. He is old. And the word the poem uses for his home is not palace. It is tent. His address is fixed and repeated like a formula, at the springs of the rivers, amid the streams of the two deeps. Messengers cross the whole world to get there. They come to the mountain of El, the tablet says, and enter the tent of the king, the father of years. His titles are Bul El, creator of creatures, the beneficent, the benign. He is called kind considerably more often than he is called strong. And we may have his portrait, a small bronze figure from Ugarit, small enough to sit in a palm, covered entirely in gold foil, seated, bearded, in a Syrian wraparound robe with a rolled edge and sandals with broad straps. The narrow eye sockets were once inlaid. Above the ears, 2 drilled holes. They held horns. Horns in this world are how you say the word God in metal. There is also a carved slab from the same city. A crowned man stands holding a jug and a staff topped with an animal head. Facing him, a bearded figure sits on a stool, in a long robe and a horned crown, one hand raised in blessing, a winged sun floating above. The identification with El is traditional and reasonable. It is not certain. Some read that seated figure as Baal instead, or as a deified king. El's consort is Atharat, and together they head a divine family. The tablets count in a single phrase, the 70 sons of Atharat. When Baal throws his housewarming feast, that is, the guest list, 70 sons, given rams and thrones, hold that number. It surfaces somewhere unexpected. Deuteronomy 32 describes the Most High dividing up humanity and fixing the borders of the nations according to account. Your Bible may read according to the number of the sons of Israel. Many modern translations read sons of God instead, and footnote Y. A Dead Sea Scroll and the Greek Septuagint both read it that way. The nations get parceled out among divine beings. And then the very next line. The Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted heritage. One of the shares is Israel. Psalm 82 opens in the same room. God takes his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. He does not deny they are there. He sentences them. You are gods, sons of the Most High. Nevertheless, like men, you shall die. That is prosecution, not embarrassment. Which brings us, finally, to the headline you have almost certainly seen. Archaeologists prove God had a wife. It runs every few years and it rests on one site, Kuntilat Ajrud, in the northern Sinai, a small, isolated way station excavated by Zeev Meshel in the middle of the 1970s. Occupied briefly, supplied entirely from outside, and holding 2 large storage jars covered in drawings and in inked Hebrew inscriptions from roughly the 8th century before Christ. One of them reads, I bless you by Yahweh of Samaria and by his Asherah. Another one says, Yahweh of Teman and his Asherah. Take that seriously, because it is genuinely startling. 2 localized Yahwehs, and a second word attached to him with the possessive, his. Now the dispute, which is real and live. In Hebrew, a personal name does not normally take a possessive ending. You do not say, his David, which is an argument that Asherah here is a thing rather than a person. The wooden cult object the Bible keeps ordering people to cut down. There are counter-arguments. Comparable formulas elsewhere in the ancient Near East do pair a god with a goddess using exactly that possessive. Some argue there is no possessive ending at all. Others read the word as sanctuary or shrine. William Dever argues for the goddess. Others call the divine couple an academic construct. Then there are the drawings on the jar, printed beside the headline as though they settle it. They do not. Those figures are usually identified as bees, an Egyptian household god. And recently the excavator went back to the museum with a conservator, had one figure cleaned, and a detail everyone had been drawing turned out not to be there. So, the inscriptions exist. They say something surprising. What they mean is open. Anybody who tells you it is closed is telling you an ending. Back to the tablets. Baal is standing at his new window, and he sends a challenge down to the one God who has not submitted. Mot. The name means death. No image of him survives. What survives is his mouth, one lip to the underworld, one lip to heaven, a tongue to the stars. His town is called the Pit. His throne is filth. His messengers are warned not to get close in case he takes them like a lamb. His reply to Baal is an invitation to dinner, and the menu is Baal. And then the tablet says something astonishing about the storm god. Mightiest Baal is afraid. The rider of the clouds is scared. That line is sitting right there in the poem. He submits. He is told to take his clouds with him, his winds, his bolts, his rains, his attendants, and his daughters, and go down. Before he descends, there is an obscure scene with a cow in the wilderness, and a boy is born. Some read that boy as a substitute left behind. The text does not use that word. It is an inference, and a reasonable one, and it is not what the tablet actually says. Messengers reached the tent at the springs of the rivers. We came upon Baal fallen to the earth. Dead is mightiest Baal. And El, the aged king, comes down off his throne, onto the footstool, and then off the footstool, onto the ground. He pours dirt on his head, puts on sackcloth, takes a stone and scores his own skin, cuts his cheeks and chin, furrows his chest like a garden. Which is worth pausing on, because the Torah forbids precisely that. You shall not make any cuts on your body for the dead. Anat finds the body, carries it up on her shoulder to the summit of Sipan, buries it, and slaughters 70 animals of each of 6 different kinds. A replacement is enthroned. Athar the Strong climbs the mountain and sits down on Baal's chair, and his feet do not reach the footstool. His head does not reach the top. I cannot be king on the summit of Sipan, he says, and climbs down and rules the flat earth instead. Then Anat catches death. She splits him with a sword, winnows him with a sieve, burns him with fire, grinds him with millstones, and sows him in a field. Read that list again. Split, winnowed, burned, ground, sown. That is not a killing. That is grain processing performed on a person. Many scholars read it exactly that way, as a harvest run backwards. Others warn it may be a stock list of total destruction. Both readings are live. Then El dreams, and the dream is the test he set himself. Let the heavens rain oil. Let the wadis run with honey. Then I will know Baal lives. The heavens rain oil. The wadis run with honey, and the old god laughs out loud and stamps his feet on his footstool. Baal comes back, and in the 7th year death comes back too with a complaint. Because of you I was split, and burned, and ground, and scattered. They fight on the summit. They gore each other like buffalo, bite like serpents, drag each other down like wrestlers. Mot is fierce, Baal is fierce. Both of them fall. And the fight is stopped by the sun goddess, Shapash, arriving with a threat from El, delivered to death directly. He will pull the props out from under your throne. He will overturn your seat. He will break the scepter of your rule. And Death, who has just eaten the storm, is afraid of his father. He yields. Let Baal be enthroned on his royal throne. Notice what does not happen. Death is not destroyed. He is talked down, and he will be back. Order holds, and it is provisional, and it gets renegotiated. That is layer 1. Now layer 3 briefly, because it is where an enormous amount of nonsense comes from. Philo of Byblos claimed to be translating an ancient Phoenician priest called Sanchuniathon, who had copied the material off temple pillars. Philo's gods are ancient kings who were later worshipped. That is a Greek theory of religion applied from outside to somebody else's religion. And Ugarit made Philo look better than he used to look. His sequence of divine generations really does match things the tablets show. But it remains a Roman period Greek summary of a tradition, 1,000 years past its Bronze Age form, preserved for us by a hostile editor. Which brings us to the subject everybody wants raised and almost nobody handles carefully. Philo has a story of the god Kronos sacrificing his own son. The Hebrew Bible condemns the burning of children in the valley of Hinnom, and in the Phoenician West at Carthage there are precincts full of small urns, stone markers over them, and a recurring word, molk. In 1935, Otto Eisfeld argued that word is not a god's name at all. It is the name of a type of offering, which would make the biblical phrase usually translated to Molech mean instead as a molk offering. That reading is contested and always has been, and the argument over what those urns actually contain is still running in the journals right now. And here is the layered discipline paying off one last time. None of it is at Ugarit. No Ugaritic myth describes the practice. The evidence comes from the Bible, from Punic North Africa, and from Greek and Roman writers. Different places, different centuries pushed into one sentence. Ugarit itself burned around 1190 before Christ, in the collapse that took most of the Bronze Age world down with it. The library went under the ash with everything in it, and after that the only surviving account of these gods was written by people who wanted them gone. And what the tablets finally showed was not that the prophets had lied. It was that they had been arguing in the same language the whole time. Rider of the clouds, the serpent with the many heads, the mountain of assembly, the tent of the old God, the council of the sons of God. The Hebrew writers knew every piece of it, and each time they picked one up, they used it to say that it belonged to somebody else. You cannot hear an argument if you only ever get one side of it. Since 1929, for the first time in 3,000 years, we have both.